Nicole always thought she was smarter than everyone else. She had it all figured out, her life, her choices, and most importantly, her husband, Brandon. A nice, stable, dependable guy. The kind of man who didn't cheat, didn't gamble, and, most annoyingly, didn't make life thrilling. They had been together for 3 years, married for 2. Nicole, now 28, was beginning to feel, let's say, restless. Brandon was a good man, but good didn't always translate to exciting. He ran a small business, paid his taxes on time, and remembered how she liked her coffee. In other words, he was everything she should have appreciated. But instead, she found herself nitpicking him like it was a full-time job. And then came Friday night. It started as an innocent girls' night out, cocktails, laughter, the usual venting about life and relationships. Somewhere between drink number 3 and a very questionable tequila shot, Nicole found herself entertaining thoughts she should have shoved right back into the toxic part of her brain. Thoughts like, did I settle? Could I have done better? By the time she stumbled home, completely obliterated, Brandon was still up, waiting for her. Because of course he was. The man was nothing if not predictable, and that's when she did it. She looked him dead in the eyes, her words slurred but crystal clear in their brutality, and said, I'm not even attracted to you anymore. Boom. Just like that. No context, no warning. Just a nuclear bomb detonated right in the middle of their marriage. Now, if this were a Hollywood movie, Brandon would have shouted, they'd have a dramatic fight, and then they'd kiss passionately in the rain. But Brandon wasn't a movie character. He was a real flesh-and-blood human being, so instead of yelling, he just sat there, staring, processing. And when Nicole woke up the next morning, head pounding, stomach in knots, she found him sitting at the edge of the bed, staring at the floor like a man who had just watched his entire life go up in flames. His first words, "Is that what you really think of me?" That was when it all started to unravel. Nicole had been hungover before, but this was the kind of hangover that made you question every life decision that led to this moment. Her brain felt like it was trying to escape through her skull. Her mouth was drier than a desert. And to top it all off, there was Brandon, sitting there, staring, looking like someone had taken a baseball bat to his sense of self-worth. "Is that what you really think of me?" he repeated, his voice quiet. Not angry, not even sad. Just empty. Now, a rational person might have immediately apologized, begged for forgiveness, maybe even cried a little to show remorse. But Nicole? Oh no, Nicole did what Nicole always did. She panicked and tried to downplay it. "Brandon, I was drunk," she groaned, rubbing her temples. "I probably didn't even know what I was saying." He didn't react, not even a blink. "Nicole," he said too calmly, "you said it with a straight face. You didn't stutter. You didn't laugh. You looked me in the eyes and told me you weren't attracted to me anymore." Oof. The worst part? She didn't even remember saying it, which meant there was no defense, no excuse. Because if she had said it while wasted, wasn't there at least a tiny grain of truth in it? Brandon stood up, rubbing his face like he was trying to physically wipe the memory away. "I need some air." And then he just left. Walked out of the room, out of the house, probably reevaluating every decision he had made since meeting her. And that was when it really hit her. Not last night, not when she woke up, but now. She had wrecked something, not just a dumb argument, not just some drunk mistake. No, she had cracked the very foundation of their marriage because of her own insecurity and boredom. And the worst part? She wasn't even sure if she regretted it. For the first time in their marriage, Brandon did not make her coffee. It was such a small thing. But when Nicole walked into the kitchen that morning, looking like death warmed over, and saw the empty counter where her steaming cup should have been, she felt a cold dread settle in her stomach. Brandon was there, sitting at the table, scrolling through his phone, sipping his coffee like nothing had happened. No good morning, no concerned, "How's your headache?" Just silence. She cleared her throat. Morning." Nothing. She tried again. Brandon, come on, are we really doing this? Still nothing. And that's when it dawned on her. He wasn't ignoring her out of anger. He was ignoring her because he was done wasting energy on her. See, Nicole was used to their little disagreements ending the same way. They'd bicker, she'd say something passive-aggressive, he'd sigh, she'd win, and they'd move on. But this wasn't a fight. This was a shift in how he saw her. And frankly, that scared the hell out of her. She pulled out a chair and sat across from him, tapping her nails on the table. Brandon, look, about last night. I was drunk. I didn't mean it. Finally, he looked up. Didn't mean it? He repeated. Or didn't mean to say it out loud? Oof, direct hit. Nicole flinched. That's not fair. Neither was hearing my own wife tell me she's not attracted to me anymore. She groaned, running a hand through her hair. God, can you stop being so dramatic? Wrong move. Brandon let out a breath that sounded almost like a laugh, but not the funny kind. The wow, I can't believe I married this person kind. He leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. Okay, Nicole, let's pretend it wasn't true. Let's pretend it was just the alcohol talking. You want to explain why, for the past year, you've been acting like I repulse you? She opened her mouth, shut it, opened it again. Because for once in her life, she didn't have an answer. Because he was right. She had been treating him differently. She had been distant, dismissive, judgmental. All because she got bored of the man she chose to marry. And now, she was watching him realize that maybe, just maybe, he didn't want to be married to her anymore. Nicole always thought she was the one in control. She set the tone in their marriage, she dictated how arguments ended, and she decided what was and wasn't worth fighting over. But now she was sitting across from a husband who had finally stopped playing her game. Brandon wasn't angry. He wasn't shouting. He wasn't even passive-aggressive. He was done. And Nicole, for the first time in a long time, felt like she had absolutely no idea how to fix it. She tried a different approach. Brandon, please, you know I love you. That got a reaction, a small one, but still. He scoffed, shaking his head like he couldn't believe what he was hearing. Love me? He repeated. Nicole, you barely tolerate me. Oof, another direct hit. Nicole crossed her arms, leaning back. That's not true. Brandon raised an eyebrow. Really? Okay. Tell me the last time you actually enjoyed spending time with me. She opened her mouth, but nothing. Not because she didn't have an answer, but because the answer was too long ago to remember. And it hit her like a truck. Brandon sighed and stood up. Look, I don't want to argue. I just need some space to think. Space. To think. That was not a phrase Nicole liked hearing. Space meant distance. Space meant he was questioning their entire marriage. And suddenly, she wasn't as sure as she had been the night before. Before she could stop herself, she blurted out, "You're overreacting." Brandon just gave her a long, unreadable look. Am I? Then, without another word, he walked out the front door. And that's when Nicole felt something she wasn't used to feeling. Not annoyance, not irritation, panic. Because for the first time she realized, maybe she had pushed him too far. Maybe, just maybe, Brandon was done waiting for her to figure out what she wanted. And what scared her even more. She wasn't sure if she even knew anymore. Nicole had always assumed that Brandon would never leave. Why? Because he was Brandon. The stable one. The reliable one. The safe one. The man who remembered to buy her favorite snacks without asking. The man who never forgot their anniversary. The man who, unlike every other guy she had dated, actually cared. And yet, there she was, standing in an eerily silent house, realizing that she might have finally found the limit of his patience. For the first couple of days, she convinced herself that he'd cool off. He just needed some time, right? She was the one who called the shots in their relationship, not him. He'd get over it, apologize for being distant, and everything would go back to normal. Except it didn't. Brandon stopped doing the little things. No more good morning when she walked into the kitchen. No more, how was your day, when she came home. No more random texts checking in on her. It was like he had put their relationship on mute. At first, Nicole brushed it off. She still had her girls, right? Brunches, drinks, gossip, it was fine. She was fine, except she wasn't. Because when she sat with her friends, sipping overpriced mimosas, she suddenly noticed that their conversations had changed. Evan booked us a weekend in Napa. Totally surprised me. Oh my God, Dylan started doing CrossFit, and he looks amazing. Tom planned the cutest date night for us last week. And then they'd look at her, waiting for her contribution. But what was she supposed to say? Oh, Brandon barely looks at me now, and I'm starting to realize that I've systematically destroyed my own marriage? Yeah, that wouldn't exactly keep the brunch mood light. Instead, she just forced a laugh and took another sip of her drink, and that's when it hit her. For months, maybe even years, she had spent time comparing Brandon to every other man, picking him apart, wishing he was more like so-and-so's husband, thinking she could do better. And now she was the one being pitied. She was the one in the sinking ship while her friends were out there living their picture-perfect Instagram lives. And for the first time in her life, Nicole felt a foreign, unpleasant emotion creeping in. Regret. Before you find out what happens next, please subscribe to the channel. Nicole didn't like this feeling, this unsettling sensation that she, who had always been the one with the upper hand in the relationship, was now the one grasping at straws. Brandon wasn't angry at her. Oh no, that would have been easier. That would have given her something to work with, something to argue against. Instead, he had become neutral, indifferent, like she was just another person in his life instead of the woman he once looked at like she hung the damn moon. And that was worse than any fight. So, naturally, Nicole did what any self-respecting woman who just realized she screwed up royally would do. She tried to fix it. She cooked his favorite meals, which, to be fair, was a bold move considering she had once burned pasta. She left cute little notes in his lunch bag, pretending she hadn't spent the last year making snide comments about his eating habits. She even, and this was her lowest moment, tried to be intimate with him. And Brandon? Every single time, he looked at her with that exhausted, unreadable expression, like he was trying to figure out who the hell she even was anymore. Not tonight, he had said the first time, and the second, and the third. By the fourth rejection, Nicole felt desperate. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. He was supposed to forgive her. He was supposed to be grateful that she was making an effort. He was supposed to, what? Thank her for suddenly deciding to be a decent wife after treating him like an afterthought for months. The realization hit her like a slap. She wasn't trying to fix things because she missed him. She was trying to fix things because she missed being the one in control, and deep down, she knew Brandon was slipping away. And worse, she deserved it. Nicole had always assumed that if things ever got bad between them, she'd be the one to leave first. After all, wasn't that how it usually worked? The woman realizes she's outgrown her husband, she moves on, she finds herself in a new, exciting life. But Brandon wasn't following the script. Instead of groveling, instead of begging, instead of fighting, he was just done. And that became painfully, devastatingly clear one Friday night. Nicole had been walking on eggshells all week, pretending everything was normal when it so clearly wasn't. Every interaction with Brandon was forced, like she was reading off a script, and he was just waiting for the scene to end. So, in her infinite wisdom, she did what she always did when she wanted to escape reality. She went to a bar. At first, it was just one drink, just to clear her head, then two, then three. Then, well, who was even counting at that point? And that's when he showed up. A man. Not particularly handsome, not particularly special, but different. Different from Brandon. He was confident, charming, and most importantly, he was giving her attention. Nicole knew what she was doing. She wasn't that drunk. She wasn't an idiot. But when he leaned in and said, "You're too pretty to be drinking alone," she didn't pull away. And when he asked, "Want to step outside?" she didn't say no, because this was the validation she had been craving, the attention she had been starved for. And then, before she could stop it, she kissed him. It wasn't some passionate, movie-worthy moment. It was messy, fueled by alcohol and poor decisions. But none of that mattered, because the second she pulled away, she saw him. Brandon, sitting in his car, watching. He didn't storm over. He didn't yell. He didn't cause a scene. He just sat there, staring at her like she was a complete stranger. And that was the moment Nicole realized she hadn't just hurt him. She had lost him. Nicole had never known true panic until that moment. Not the mild inconvenience kind of panic, like realizing you left your phone at home or sent a risky text after one too many drinks. No, this was the soul-crushing, stomach-dropping, cold sweat kind of panic that came when you realized you had officially destroyed your life. She took a step forward, heart pounding. "Brandon, wait." But he didn't wait, didn't even hesitate. He just rolled up his window, put the car in drive, and left. No yelling, no confrontation. No big dramatic scene where she could argue her way out of it. Just silence. And that was worse than anything. The guy from the bar looked confused. "Wait, you know him?" Nicole barely looked at him. "That's my husband." His face paled. "Oh, shit. Yeah. Oh, shit was right." She shoved past him, fumbling for her phone. One missed call, 2, 3, straight to voicemail every time. By the time she got home, his car was gone, his keys were missing, and the house felt colder than it ever had before. That's when it hit her. He wasn't coming back. Not tonight. Maybe not ever. Nicole didn't sleep. She just sat in bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out how the hell she let it get this far. By the time the sun came up, she was a wreck. Her eyes were swollen from crying, her head was throbbing, and her stomach churned with nausea that had nothing to do with alcohol. And then, footsteps. Brandon was home. Nicole bolted out of bed and ran to the kitchen, rehearsing apologies in her head. But when she saw him, she stopped cold. Because this wasn't the face of a man who wanted to talk things out. This was the face of a man who had already made his decision. He was sitting at the table, arms crossed, eyes unreadable. Finally, he spoke. "We need to talk." 2 days ago, that sentence would have meant she still had a chance. Today, it meant she was out of time. Nicole sat down slowly. "Brandon, listen." He held up a hand. "Don't." That one word cut deeper than if he had screamed at her. Then, calmly, like he had been preparing for this moment all night, he said, "You made it clear last night that you don't respect me, you don't respect this marriage, and honestly, I don't think you ever really did." Nicole's throat closed up. "That's not true." Brandon just shook his head. "Nicole, you kissed another man." Her stomach twisted. "It was a mistake." "No, it was a choice." His voice didn't waver. "You chose to do it, just like you chose over and over again to make me feel like I wasn't enough." Nicole couldn't breathe. "Brandon, please, I love you." For the first time since walking in, Brandon's expression actually changed. He looked sad. "No, you don't," he said quietly. "You love the idea of me. You love having someone who takes care of you, but you don't love me." She felt like she had been punched in the gut. "That's not true. You're everything to me." Brandon sighed, standing up. "No, Nicole. I was just convenient." Her breath caught. "You're leaving." It wasn't a question. "Yeah," he said, matter-of-factly. "I am." And then the final blow. "I'll have my lawyer contact you about the separation." Nicole had never known a silence so loud. She could beg, she could cry, she could scream. But none of it would change the simple, painful truth. Brandon was done cleaning up her mess. And now, for the first time in years, she was alone. Nicole always thought heartbreak was supposed to be loud. Messy fights, dramatic shouting matches, doors slamming, things being thrown. That's how breakups happened, right? But this was quiet. There was no screaming, no dramatic exit, no big Hollywood speech where she poured her heart out and made him stay. Just Brandon packing his things and walking out the door. Nicole sat on the couch, staring at the empty space where his shoes used to be. His keys were gone, his jacket, his toothbrush. It was like he had been surgically removed from her life overnight. And that's when it hit her. She had spent so much time wishing he was different, wishing he was taller, fitter, flashier, more like the men she scrolled past on Instagram. And now she was left with exactly what she had been asking for, a life without him. Nicole thought she was handling it well at first. She told herself she was fine. She still had her job. She still had her friends. She was still Nicole, for God's sake. But the cracks started to show fast, because, as it turned out, nobody likes to be friends with the cautionary tale. Jenna, her best friend, the one who used to gossip with her at brunch, had suddenly become busy all the time. Her other friends? They weren't much better. Conversations got shorter, texts went unanswered, and slowly but surely she became the person no one wanted to be around. And she knew exactly why. She was the walking, talking example of what happens when you take a good thing for granted. Jenna confirmed it one night when Nicole finally confronted her. "Are you avoiding me?" Nicole asked, forcing a laugh, like she already knew the answer was no. Jenna hesitated. "Look, Nicole, my husband doesn't really want me hanging around you right now." Nicole blinked. "What?" Jenna sighed. "He thinks you're a bad influence." And there it was. Her worst nightmare. She wasn't the girl who had it all anymore. She wasn't the one everyone envied. She was the cautionary tale, the woman who threw away a perfectly good marriage because she got bored, and now she was paying for it. Nicole always thought rock bottom was just an expression. But now, sitting alone in a tiny, depressing studio apartment, eating instant ramen like a college freshman, she realized, nope, it's very real. It had been 6 months since Brandon left, 6 months since he had looked her in the eyes and decided that she wasn't worth fighting for anymore. And now he was thriving. Because, of course, he was. It happened on a random Tuesday. Nicole had gone to the store looking half dead. No makeup, baggy hoodie, hair in a messy bun. She had stopped caring about appearances a long time ago, and that's when she saw him. Brandon, laughing, smiling, holding hands with a stunning woman. Like runway model stunning. The kind of woman who actually went to the gym instead of just posting about it. Nicole's stomach dropped. Because he looked happy. Not just getting by happy. Not just pretending happy, but genuinely, effortlessly happier than he had ever been with her. The new woman leaned in, whispered something, and Brandon laughed. Not just any laugh, the real kind, the kind Nicole hadn't heard from him in years. And that hurt worse than anything. She had spent so long believing that Brandon was the problem, that he was the reason she felt unfulfilled, unexcited, unsatisfied. But the truth was brutal. It had never been Brandon. It had always been her. Nicole left the store without buying anything. She sat in her car, gripping the steering wheel, staring at her reflection in the rearview mirror. And for the first time in her life, she had to admit the truth. She had a good man. A kind man. A man who had loved her unconditionally, and she had thrown it all away. For what? For validation? For attention? For some fantasy version of life that never even existed? And now, she was alone. Not the cool, independent, thriving woman kind of alone. But the no one answers your texts, you eat dinner by yourself, and no one cares if you come home or not kind of alone. And worst of all, Brandon wasn't coming back. She had officially lost the only person who ever truly loved her. And she had no one to blame but herself. If you enjoyed the story, please subscribe to the channel. I wish you a great mood and good luck.